Weeks after my son's funeral, my daughter-in-law, Victoria, threw me out of the home Michael had promised was mine forever. She didn't care I had nowhere to go, or what would happen to our grandchildren. I simply packed my meager belongings and left, a quiet resolve hardening my heart. What she didn't realize was that sometimes, the quietest departures lead to the loudest returns. Join me as I share my journey. Like, share, and let me know where you are listening from. Eleanor sat on the edge of Michael's bed, the scent of his cologne clinging faintly to the wool of a navy sweater she held. It had been barely a month since the funeral, and the sharpness of her grief felt as raw as the day she had learned of his accident. Each fold she made in his familiar clothes was a deliberate, agonizing act, a physical manifestation of her heart breaking all over again. The tears came silently, steadily, tracing cold paths down her weathered cheeks, dropping onto the soft fabric like dew. Michael, her only son, gone too soon. The silence in the room was a heavy blanket, broken only by the quiet sniffle she couldn't suppress. She clutched a worn football jersey, imagining Michael's strong, comforting arms around her, wishing for just one more hug. The door, previously ajar, swung open abruptly. Victoria stood there, a stark contrast to the subdued elegance she had maintained throughout the funeral. Her black dress was gone, replaced by casual attire. But her posture was rigid, her expression tight. Her voice, when it came, was sharp, cutting through the somber air like a knife. It bore none of the quiet sorrow or polite deference she had shown in public. "Eleanor," Victoria began, her tone devoid of warmth. "We need to talk." 8. Eleanor flinched, startled, the jersey slipping from her fingers. She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen. "Of course, dear. Is everything all right with Lily and Noah?" Victoria sighed, a sound of impatient exasperation. "The children are fine. This isn't about them. Not directly, anyway. It's about space. I need space to grieve properly, Eleanor. And frankly, you're just too much." Eleanor felt a fresh wave of pain, sharper than the grief itself. "Too much?" "Victoria, I'm grieving my son. Our son." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you're always crying," Victoria retorted, her voice rising slightly. "It's not healthy for the children to see you like this all the time. They need stability, not constant displays of despair." She gestured vaguely around the room, as if Eleanor's very presence contaminated the atmosphere. "They need a mother who is strong, not someone who reminds them of what they've lost every single day." "It just evolved." Eleanor pushed herself up from the bed, her legs trembling. "Victoria, this was my home too," she said, her voice shaking with a mixture of grief and rising indignation. "Michael promised me. He said I would always have a place here. With him. With all of you. He built this house for us." Victoria's gaze hardened. "Michael isn't here anymore, Eleanor. Things change. The house is mine now. My name is on the deed, not yours. Michael's promises, they don't apply anymore." The words were chillingly direct, stripped of any pretense of sympathy. A cold dread began to spread through Eleanor's chest, replacing the raw ache of loss. "What are you saying?" she whispered, her throat suddenly dry. "I'm saying I need you to leave," Victoria stated, her eyes unwavering. "I'm giving you 24 hours to pack your things and find somewhere else to go." The world spun for a moment. 24 hours? Leave? This house, Michael's house, her home for the last 5 years since Michael had insisted she move in after her own small cottage had become too much to maintain. Where would she go? She had no other family. No savings to speak of, relying solely on Michael's support, which had vanished with him. "But where will I go?" Eleanor stammered, her voice barely audible. Her thoughts immediately flew to Lily and Noah, her sweet grandchildren, their faces still etched with confusion and sadness. "And the children? Who will look after them when you're at work? Who will walk them to school?" "I've been doing all of that since Michael." Victoria cut her off, a dismissive flick of her wrist. "That is not your concern, Eleanor. I will figure it out. You are not my responsibility. You never were, not really. You were Michael's mother, yes. But your role here ended when he did." She looked around Michael's room with an air of clinical detachment. "This is my family's future, and I need to make the best decisions for it. And right now, that means you need to go." The cruel finality of her words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Every memory of shared laughter, of evenings spent helping with homework, of comforting Lily after a nightmare, of baking Noah's favorite cookies, all dismissed, invalidated. Eleanor realized then that Victoria saw her not as a grieving mother or a beloved grandmother, but as an inconvenience, a burden to be shed. With a heavy heart, Eleanor began to pack. Her belongings were few: a couple of worn suitcases filled with clothes, a small box of photographs, a Bible, and a few cherished trinkets. She carefully folded Michael's favorite navy cardigan, the one he wore on crisp autumn evenings, and tucked it into her bag, inhaling the faint, lingering scent of him one last time. She found a framed photo on Michael's nightstand, a smiling family portrait taken just last summer. Michael with his arm around Victoria, Lily and Noah beaming in front, and Eleanor nestled between them, looking utterly content. She slipped it into her bag, a bittersweet ache in her chest. As the sun began to peek over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of rose and lavender, Eleanor finished her silent task. She went to the children's rooms, standing in the doorways, watching Lily and Noah sleep soundly. They looked so innocent, so vulnerable. She longed to kiss their foreheads, to tell them she loved them, but she couldn't. She couldn't bear to wake them, to see the confusion and hurt in their eyes as she explained she was leaving. Instead, she found a small notepad and scribbled a short, heartbreaking note. "My dearest Lily and Noah, Grandma loves you more than words can say. Be brave, be kind, and remember Michael loved you very much. I will always be thinking of you. You are strong, my little loves." She folded it carefully and slipped it under Lily's pillow, a silent promise she prayed they would one day understand. Her old car, which Michael had insisted on keeping in good repair, was loaded. Eleanor took one last look at the house, a place that had been her sanctuary, filled with the echoes of a life now shattered. A single tear escaped, but this time, it was a tear of resolve, not just grief. She started the engine, the rumble breaking the dawn's quiet, and drove away, leaving behind the only family she had left, homeless and heartbroken. From the upstairs window, Victoria watched, her silhouette stark against the growing light, ensuring Eleanor's departure. The metallic tang of fear and the persistent chill of dawn had become Eleanor's constant companions. For 2 weeks, her world had shrunk to the confines of her aging sedan, parked discreetly behind a bustling 24-hour diner. Every morning, she woke with a stiff back and a sense of profound disorientation, the passenger seat a poor substitute for a bed. Yet, even in this raw state of survival, she clung fiercely to her dignity. She kept a small bottle of water and a washcloth to wipe her face, trying to scrub away the evidence of a night spent in a cold car. Her clothes, though few, were meticulously folded, and she would smooth them out each morning, a silent rebellion against the chaos of her new reality. The diner itself became her oasis, a fragile lifeline to normalcy. She would slip inside, always at the quieter hours, heading straight for the restroom. The warm water, however fleeting, was a luxury, allowing her to wash her hands and splash her face, to try and banish the tired shadows from her eyes. After, she'd find a booth tucked away in a corner, far from the curious glances of the regular patrons. A single cup of coffee, black, and maybe a piece of toast if her meager funds allowed, constituted her breakfast. The waitresses, busy and efficient, barely registered her presence, and she found a strange comfort in that anonymity. Her companions were the forgotten newspapers left behind, their pages crinkled and smudged, offering a glimpse into a world she no longer belonged to, yet still desperately craved. The physical discomfort of living in a car was immense. The cramped space, the sleepless nights, the ache in her bones from the unyielding seats, the constant fear of being discovered, of having her last refuge taken away, gnawed at her. But worse than any of that was the overwhelming feeling of invisibility. It was as if she had ceased to exist in the eyes of the world. One afternoon, while waiting for the diner to empty enough for her to feel less conspicuous, she saw Susan, her neighbor from across the street in her old life. Walking into the diner with a friend, Eleanor's heart leaped with a desperate hope for recognition, a kind word, a momentary connection. She raised a tentative hand, a small, almost imperceptible wave. Susan's eyes, bright and searching, swept right past her, over her, through her. There was no flicker of recognition, no pause. It was as if Eleanor was a ghost, a blur in the background. In that moment, a chilling realization washed over her. She hadn't just lost her home. She had crossed an invisible line. She was no longer Eleanor, Michael's mother, Lily and Noah's grandmother, a contributing member of society. She was just nothing. A face in a crowd, utterly unseen, unheard, unremembered. Homelessness wasn't just about lacking shelter. It was about lacking identity. A place in the human tapestry. Her greatest longing, however, was for Lily and Noah. Each day, usually in the late afternoon, Eleanor would drive slowly past Michael's house, her former home, her heart aching with a desperate need to catch a glimpse of them. She never stopped, never parked, just a slow, painful crawl past the familiar facade, hoping to see a flash of their bright hair, a wave from a window. Anything to confirm they were safe, that they remembered her. Most days, the house was quiet, the blinds drawn. Then came the day that twisted the knife in her heart even deeper. As she rounded the corner onto their street, her breath caught in her throat. A massive commercial dumpster, the kind used for major renovations, sat in the driveway, and spilling over its sides, carelessly tossed and broken, were Michael's things. Michael's cherished belongings, his sturdy oak desk, where he had spent countless hours working and laughing with the children, his overflowing bookshelf, filled with his favorite worn novels and technical manuals, his comfortable, faded recliner, where he would unwind after a long day, Lily often curled up beside him, Noah on his lap. Eleanor pulled her car to the curb a little further down the street, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles whitened. Her eyes, stinging with fresh tears, darted towards the house. Victoria was there, standing on the newly mowed lawn, dressed in stylish workout gear, directing two burly men who were hauling out more furniture. She was laughing, her voice carrying faintly on the breeze, her phone pressed to her ear, clearly engaged in a lively conversation. She looked completely unburdened, utterly joyful. Eleanor watched in horror as the men dragged out Michael's large, polished dining table, the very one they had eaten countless family dinners on, the table where Michael had laid out his blueprints and spent his final months planning projects. It was sturdy, well-made, a piece of their family history. With a grunt, one of the men heaved an end, and it crashed into the dumpster, its legs snapping with a sickening crack. A guttural cry escaped Eleanor's lips. Rage, cold and burning, mixed with the profound ache of heartbreak, consumed her. Her whole body trembled. She pulled the car further down, parking haphazardly, her vision blurred by tears. How could Victoria be so heartless? To discard Michael's life, their shared memories, with such casual cruelty. It was as if she was erasing him, purging every trace of his existence, and by extension, Eleanor's own connection to him. Later that afternoon, seeking refuge from the cold and the gnawing emptiness, Eleanor found herself at the public library. The warmth was a balm, the quiet, a temporary sanctuary. She settled at a computer, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. It was a mistake, she knew, but the urge was too strong. She opened Facebook, a habit from her old life, a desperate hope flickering that perhaps Victoria had posted a picture of the children, or something kind, something that didn't shatter her world further. Instead, she saw Victoria's latest post, a series of gleaming photographs showcasing a redecorated living room. Gone were the warm, inviting tones, the familiar family photos, Michael's favorite armchair. In its place was a sterile, minimalist space dominated by sleek, modern furniture in cold grays and whites. The caption, bold and unapologetic, pierced Eleanor's heart like a shard of glass, clearing out the old to make room for the new. So excited for this fresh start, Eleanor felt the tears well up, hot and uncontrollable, blurring the screen. She pressed a hand to her mouth to stifle a sob. Clearing out the old, That's what she was, Michael's mother, his children's grandmother. A woman who had poured 5 years of her life into caring for his family, running his home, making it a sanctuary. She was just the old, easily discarded, disposable, like a broken chair or a worn-out photograph. The tears flowed freely then, a torrent of grief, humiliation, and a growing, dangerous anger. The dream was a gentle reprieve from the harsh reality of her days. Eleanor was back in a sun-drenched park, chasing a giggling, chubby-legged Michael, no older than 5. He wore a bright yellow t-shirt and held a tattered teddy bear, his laughter echoing pure joy. He stumbled, she caught him, and he looked up at her with eyes full of adoration. She bent down, brushing his messy hair from his forehead, pressing a kiss to his soft cheek. "My sweet boy," she whispered, her heart swelling with an emotion so vivid it almost pulled her back into the realm of the living. Then, the shrill, insistent ring of her old cell phone pierced through the tender illusion. Eleanor jolted awake, disoriented, her head hitting the passenger window of her car. The dream fragments dissolved, replaced by the familiar ache in her back and the stale, chilly air of the vehicle. She blinked, trying to orient herself in the dim light of early morning. The phone, resting on the dashboard, continued its clamor. Her cracked screen displayed an unknown number, a long string of digits she didn't recognize. Hesitantly, a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach, she reached for it. Who could be calling her? She had no one left, certainly no one who would call from an unfamiliar number. After a few more rings, she took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves, and answered, her voice raspy from sleep and the dry air. "Hello?" A crisp, professional male voice responded. "Good morning. May I speak with Eleanor Vance, please?" "This is Eleanor," she replied, her heart starting to beat a little faster. "Miss Vance, my name is David Lee. I'm an attorney with Lee Martinez and Associates." I was Michael Vance's attorney. The name Michael sent a fresh wave of grief through her, but it was quickly overshadowed by confusion. Michael's attorney? Why would he be calling her? Eleanor tried to sound composed, to hide the tremor in her voice, to mask the dire circumstances of her current existence. "Oh, Mr. Lee. Yes, I'm not sure what I can do for you. My son, he passed away a few weeks ago. As you know." "Yes, Miss Vance, I'm aware. And I offer my sincerest condolences again for your loss," David Lee said, his tone sympathetic but unwavering. "I've actually been trying to reach you for some days now, regarding Michael's estate. Your contact information was a little difficult to track down." Eleanor's brow furrowed. Michael's estate? She assumed it was probably about some outstanding bills, or perhaps an insurance detail Michael might have forgotten. "Oh, I see," she said, trying to sound as if she were in an office, not huddled in a car. "Well, I'm afraid I'm not really involved with any of that. Victoria, Michael's wife. She's handling all of Michael's affairs, his finances, everything. She knows all the details." She hoped mentioning Victoria would politely redirect him, freeing her from this unexpected and rather uncomfortable conversation. There was a brief pause on the other end, a moment of silence that felt charged. Then, David Lee's voice came back, lower, more serious. "Miss Vance, the reason I'm contacting you directly is that there are specific provisions in Michael's will that concern you." Directly. Eleanor felt a sudden chill, despite the warming morning sun beginning to filter through the windshield. Provisions in Michael's will? For her? What could that possibly mean? Her mind raced, grasping for possibilities, none of which made any sense. Michael had always taken care of her, ensuring she had a home, food, a small allowance. But his will, provisions, she repeated, her voice thin. "I don't understand." "Suffice it to say," David Lee continued, his words careful and measured, "these are significant, and I also need to make it clear that, to the best of my knowledge, Michael's wife, Victoria, is not aware of these specific provisions." Eleanor gasped, a sharp, involuntary sound. Victoria wasn't aware? That deepened the mystery, twisting a strange knot of anticipation and apprehension in her stomach. Victoria, who had claimed everything was hers, who had thrown her out without a second thought, was somehow out of the loop. It seemed impossible. "Mr. Lee," Eleanor said, her voice trembling slightly. "This is all very unexpected. What exactly are we talking about?" "I can't discuss the specifics over the phone, Miss Vance," David Lee replied, his professional tone firm. "It's imperative that we meet in person. As soon as possible. Can you come to my office today? Or tomorrow? At the latest. An in-person meeting. Today." Eleanor looked down at her clothes, the same ones she'd been wearing for 2 days, wrinkled and smelling faintly of stale air. Her hair was a mess, her face drawn. She certainly didn't look like someone who belonged in a fancy lawyer's office. The shame, which she had tried so hard to suppress, resurfaced, burning her cheeks. I don't know, Mr. Lee," she stammered, trying to find an excuse, to buy herself time. I'm going through a rather difficult time right now. My appearance, I'm not really presentable." The words tumbled out. An admission of her humiliating circumstances. There was another pause, a beat of thoughtful silence. Then, David Lee's voice softened, losing some of its professional crispness, imbued instead with a gentle but firm insistence. "Miss Vance," he said, his tone resonating with an unexpected understanding. "Please. The provisions in Michael's will need to be addressed, and time is of the essence. Come as you are." The phrase echoed in her mind. It was a lifeline, a command, a glimmer of something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope, a fragile, terrifying hope that something, anything, might be about to change. She closed her eyes, clutching the phone, a strange blend of fear and a desperate, burgeoning curiosity swirling within her. Eleanor stood outside the imposing glass doors of the skyscraper, her heart thumping in erratic rhythm against her ribs. The building soared into the sky, a gleaming monument to wealth and power. Inside, the lobby was a symphony of polished marble and hushed conversations. She felt completely out of place, a lone, worn sparrow in a gilded cage. Taking a deep breath, she pushed through the revolving doors, her old shoes squeaking faintly on the pristine floor. Following the directions given to her, she ascended to the 30th floor, where the name Lee Martinez and Associates was elegantly etched on a frosted glass door. A polite receptionist led her into a spacious office with panoramic views of the city. David Lee rose from behind a large, mahogany desk. He was a distinguished man in his late 50s, with silver-streaked hair, a tailored suit, and eyes that held a surprising warmth and kindness. He extended a hand, and his grip was firm but gentle. "Miss Vance, thank you for coming. Please, have a seat." Eleanor sank into the plush leather armchair opposite his desk, feeling the softness engulf her, a stark contrast to the hard seats of her car. She clutched her worn handbag in her lap, feeling utterly exposed and vulnerable. "Can I get you anything, Miss Vance?" David Lee asked, his voice calm and reassuring. "Coffee? Water? Coffee, please." Eleanor managed, her throat tight. The warmth of a hot drink felt like an unimaginable luxury. He nodded, and a moment later, a young assistant brought in a steaming mug, placing it carefully on a coaster before her. Eleanor wrapped her cold hands around the ceramic, drawing comfort from the heat. David Lee leaned forward slightly, his gaze direct but not intrusive. "Miss Vance, before we delve into Michael's will, may I ask you a personal question?" Eleanor nodded, bracing herself. "Where are you currently residing?" The question caught her completely off guard. The heat rose to her cheeks, a blush of shame that she thought she had long since suppressed. She swallowed hard, searching for a polite evasion, but found none. The truth, raw and humiliating, spilled out. I'm staying in my car, Mr. Lee. Behind the diner off Miller Street." The words were barely a whisper, a testament to her utter despair. David Lee's expression remained unreadable, but a flicker of compassion softened his eyes. He nodded slowly, then leaned back in his chair. "I see. Thank you for your honesty, Miss Vance. I appreciate that. And please know that Michael, he anticipated this might happen." Eleanor frowned, confused. Anticipated? How could Michael have anticipated her being homeless? Without further explanation, David Lee reached for a thick, manila folder on his desk. He opened it, revealing several bound documents within. He slipped on a pair of reading glasses, his movements deliberate and unhurried. Now, as I mentioned, I've been trying to reach you regarding Michael's last will and testament. I know this must be difficult, but I need to read some specific sections aloud. Eleanor nodded, her heart pounding with a strange mix of fear and a burgeoning, tentative hope. She knew so little about Michael's finances. He had always been private about his business, preferring to shield her from the complexities. She had simply assumed that everything, as was customary, went to Victoria and the children. David Lee cleared his throat. Michael came to see me approximately 8 months ago, Miss Vance. Shortly after he received his diagnosis, he wanted to make some very specific and, as it turned out, rather confidential changes to his will. Changes he did not wish to share with anyone else at the time. A fresh wave of sadness washed over Eleanor. 8 months ago, that meant Michael had known then. Known he was leaving her, leaving them all. And he had come here, in secret, to make these changes. David Lee adjusted his glasses, scanning the document. I will read the relevant sections directly. This particular clause begins here. To my beloved mother, Eleanor Vance, who sacrificed so much for me throughout my life, who was my rock and my unwavering support, and who has shown boundless love and care to my children, Lily and Noah, especially in these recent years. I leave the sum of, he paused, a dramatic beat that seemed to stretch into an eternity. Eleanor leaned forward, her breath held captive in her chest. The sum of $7 million, in 77. The words hung in the air, echoing in the quiet office. $7 million. Eleanor blinked, certain she had misheard. The number was so astronomically large, so utterly fantastical, that her mind refused to process it. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Did you say 7,000? I must have misheard. David Lee lowered the document, his kind eyes meeting hers. A small, empathetic smile touched his lips. No, Miss Vance. I said $7 million. $7 million. Your son, Michael, was a brilliant and successful man, far wealthier than most people knew. He was very private about his business dealings. Eleanor felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. $7 million. It was impossible. Her mind reeled, trying to reconcile this impossible figure with Victoria's cruel eviction, her blatant assertion that everything belonged to her, that Eleanor was a burden, disposable. Victoria had thrown her out onto the street, implying she had nothing, when all along, Michael had left her this, a fortune. The shock was immense, overwhelming, almost sickening. I know this is a lot to take in, but trust me, it only gets more shocking. Don't miss a single detail of Michael's incredible foresight and the justice that's coming. Keep watching, like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. The shock of the $7 million was still reverberating through Eleanor, making her head spin. She stared at David Lee, her mouth slightly agape, trying to reconcile the impossible sum with her reality of living in a car. But Victoria, she stammered, her voice choked. She told me everything was hers. She threw me out, said I had 24 hours to leave, that I was a burden, that my 5 years of caring for her, for Michael, for the children, meant nothing. The raw hurt and humiliation she had endured for the past 2 weeks surged to the surface. David Lee's kind eyes hardened slightly, his expression growing grim. He nodded slowly, a knowing look on his face. Miss Vance, I regret to inform you, but Michael, he specifically anticipated this scenario. He feared it, actually. It was the primary reason for these confidential amendments to his will. Eleanor felt a chill creep up her spine. Michael had feared this? Feared Victoria would turn on his own mother? The thought was both devastating and strangely comforting, confirming her darkest suspicions about her daughter-in-law. David Lee flipped to another page in the thick will, his finger tracing a line. This next clause is, in some ways, even more significant than the financial one. It details Michael's wishes regarding the custody of his children. He paused, taking a moment to gather his thoughts, then began to read, his voice clear and resonant. In the event that my wife, Victoria Peterson, attempts to remove my beloved mother, Eleanor Vance, from the family home at 145 Sycamore Lane, or otherwise creates an environment hostile or detrimental to my mother's well-being, full legal and physical custody of my children, Lily Peterson and Noah Peterson, shall immediately transfer to my mother, Eleanor Vance. My explicit wish is that my children are raised by my mother in a loving and stable environment, free from undue emotional distress and manipulation. Eleanor gasped, a sharp, involuntary sound. Her coffee mug, still warm in her hands, slipped from her trembling fingers, clattering onto the thick rug with a soft thud. Lily and Noah, full custody? It was impossible. Her grandchildren, her precious Lily and Noah, were to be hers? The thought was overwhelming, unbelievable. How is this possible? She whispered, tears springing to her eyes, a mix of profound shock and a dawning incandescent joy. Victoria. She's their mother. She would never allow it. David Lee picked up the mug, setting it gently on the desk. Miss Vance. Michael was a meticulous man, and incredibly intelligent. He didn't just write this clause, he supported it with irrefutable evidence. Months ago, he began to document Victoria's concerning behaviors. He observed her increasing detachment, her focus on material things over the emotional needs of the children, and her growing resentment towards your presence in the home. He continued, his voice grave. Michael began to notice Victoria's unusual interest in his life insurance policies, her increasingly frequent comments about wanting a fresh start if anything were to happen to him, and her almost complete lack of emotional connection to the children's grief, even immediately after his diagnosis. He was deeply worried about the environment she would create for Lily and Noah, and even more worried about what would happen to you. Then, David Lee reached for another, smaller folder on his desk. Michael also entrusted me with something else. He set up a discreet recording device in his study. He captured several conversations with Victoria that shed a very clear light on her intentions. Eleanor's blood ran cold. Recordings? Of Victoria? These recordings, David Lee explained, his voice low, capture Victoria discussing her plans after Michael's passing. Her clear intention to send you away, Miss Vance, as soon as possible, and her desire to relocate the children to California, where her estranged family lives, ostensibly for a new beginning. But clearly, to cut all ties to Michael's memory and your influence. Eleanor listened in horrified silence, her heart aching for Michael, for the terrible burden he had carried in his final months. He had known Victoria's true nature, her callousness, her selfishness, and he had moved to protect them all. David Lee then reached into the folder again, pulling out a single, folded letter. And finally, Miss Vance, Michael wrote this for you. He specifically instructed me to give it to you only after I had explained the will's provisions. Eleanor's hands, already shaking, trembled violently as she reached for the letter. The paper felt sacred. Carrying the last words of her beloved son, she saw her name. In Michael's familiar, strong handwriting, scrawled across the front, a fresh wave of tears blurred her vision. Could you read it, please, Mr. Lee? She choked out, unable to trust her own voice. David Lee nodded, his voice softening as he began to read Michael's words, a voice from beyond the grave. My dearest Mom, if you are reading this, it means I am gone, and you are with David, learning about my last wishes. My heart breaks knowing the pain you must be feeling, and I am so deeply sorry for the burden I have left you with. I know Victoria better than anyone, and I have seen the changes in her, the coldness. I was terrified of what she would do to you, and to Lily and Noah. Once I was no longer here to protect you, I feared she would turn them against you, isolate them, fill their heads with her resentment and selfishness. She was never truly fond of your presence, nor did she appreciate the selfless care you gave us all. She called it a burden, a charity. But I know the truth. Mom, you were the glue that held us together. Eleanor sobbed openly, the words like a balm and a fresh wound, all at once. The money I have left you, Mom, is not just a gift. It is payment for all the years you put our needs before your own, for every sacrifice, every late night, every comforting word. But more importantly, it is the means for you to protect Lily and Noah. They need you, Mom, more than they will ever know. You are their anchor, their true home. I know you, Mom. You will doubt yourself. You will feel guilt. You will worry about taking them from Victoria. But please, do not let that stop you. This is what I want. This is what they need. You are strong, you are kind, and you are the best grandmother any child could ever ask for. Use this, Mom. Claim what is rightfully yours, and give my children the love and stability they deserve. My only regret is that I won't be there to see you do it. I love you, Mom, forever. Michael, telesode. Tears streamed down Eleanor's face, a torrent of emotion she could no longer hold back. But these were not the silent, sorrowful tears of grief that had become her constant companion. No. These were tears of profound relief, of overwhelming vindication, and of a burgeoning, undeniable sense of power. Michael's words, his love, his foresight, echoed in her mind, wrapping around her heart, healing wounds she thought would never close. The shame of her homelessness, the pain of Victoria's cruelty, all began to recede, replaced by a fierce, protective resolve. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, taking a deep, shuddering breath. When she spoke again, her voice, though still thick with emotion, was remarkably steadier, imbued with a newfound strength. "Mr. Lee," she said, her gaze firm, "when can we proceed with the custody transfer? For Lily and Noah." 8. David Lee smiled, a genuine, warm expression that reached his kind eyes. "As soon as you're ready, Miss Vance, we can file the necessary paperwork this afternoon. Given the explicit terms of Michael's will and the supporting evidence, this will be a straightforward process, albeit potentially a difficult one emotionally for Victoria." He paused, then added, "First, though, let's get you settled. I've already arranged for a comfortable hotel room for you for tonight, and we can discuss more permanent housing options tomorrow." Michael was very clear about ensuring your immediate comfort and security. Eleanor felt a profound shift within her. The invisible shroud of invisibility and helplessness that had cloaked her for weeks began to lift. She was no longer a victim, discarded and disposable. She was, in a heartbeat, about to become the most important person in Lily and Noah's lives, their guardian, their protector, fulfilling Michael's final, sacred wish. The weight of responsibility was immense. But so was the love that fueled it. A small, tentative smile touched her lips, the first genuine smile in weeks. It wasn't just hope, it was empowerment. Fueled by Michael's enduring love and his incredible foresight, he had truly thought of everything. 3 days later, the transformation was remarkable. Eleanor stood before Michael's house, no longer a phantom haunting the periphery, but a woman with purpose and a clear destination. The 2 nights in a comfortable hotel had worked wonders. She had taken long, hot showers, slept in a real bed, and eaten nourishing meals. The new, simple but elegant clothes David Lee had arranged for her made her feel, for the first time in ages, like herself again. Her hair was neatly combed, her shoulders held back. The tired shadows still lingered in her eyes, but they were now overshadowed by a quiet confidence. She wasn't just Eleanor Vance. She was Eleanor Vance, armed with her son's legacy, ready to reclaim what was rightfully hers. Beside her stood David Lee, radiating professional calm, and a kind-faced social worker named Miss Jenkins, who offered a reassuring nod. A uniformed officer, Officer Davis, stood a little to their side, his presence a clear statement of official authority. The air was crisp, the sky a brilliant blue, an ironic contrast to the storm that was about to break. David Lee turned to Eleanor. "Miss Vance," he began, his voice low, "Victoria is likely to be emotional, possibly volatile. I advise you to let me do most of the talking. Your presence is essential, of course. But for now, We will handle the confrontation. Eleanor nodded, her heart thumping, but her resolve steady. She wasn't afraid anymore. Not truly. She was too focused on Lily and Noah. Officer Davis cleared his throat, adjusting his stance. Movement, inside the house. Looks like someone's home. Eleanor took a deep breath. The familiar scent of the budding spring flowers in the garden filling her lungs. This was it. She walked up the familiar brick path, the very path she had swept countless times, and approached the front door. Her hand, steady and unhesitating, reached out and pressed the doorbell. The chime, a sound she had heard thousands of times, now resonated with a completely new authority, announcing not a visitor, but an unavoidable reckoning. The door opened, revealing Victoria. Her expressions cycled rapidly from polite confusion at seeing Eleanor to outright panic as her eyes registered David Lee's sharp suit, the serious social worker, and finally, the unmistakable uniform of Officer Davis. Her face, usually so composed, went pale. "Eleanor, what is this? What are you doing here?" Victoria demanded, her voice tight with a mixture of surprise and sudden fear. She looked from Eleanor to the small entourage, a flicker of suspicion in her eyes. David Lee stepped forward, his presence commanding. "Good morning, Mrs. Peterson. My name is David Lee, an attorney from Lee Martinez and Associates. We're here to discuss some important legal matters concerning your children, Lily and Noah." "Vari." Victoria's gaze snapped back to Eleanor, then to Officer Davis. "Legal matters? What about the children? Why is the police here? Is Eleanor in some kind of trouble?" Her tone suggested hope more than concern. Officer Davis, his expression neutral, took a step forward. "No, Mrs. Peterson. We're here at the request of Mr. Lee to oversee a legal custody transfer. We'll need to come inside." The words seemed to hit Victoria like a physical blow. Her face went ashen, her carefully constructed composure threatening to shatter. She hesitated for a long moment, then slowly, reluctantly, stepped aside, allowing them entry. Eleanor walked into the living room, a stark contrast to the warm, inviting space it once was. The new minimalist furniture, in cold grays and whites, made it feel more like a hotel lobby than a family home. There was no sign of Lily or Noah. No toys. No school bags. No cheerful clutter. Just a sterile, impersonal display, exactly as Victoria had curated on Facebook. The social worker, Miss Jenkins, was the first to speak. Her voice gentle but professional. "Mrs. Peterson, are Lily and Noah home?" "No," Victoria replied, her voice strained. "They're at school." She turned back to David Lee, her eyes narrowed. "What is this custody transfer business? What are you talking about?" David Lee wasted no time. He pulled out the documents, the same will Eleanor had heard excerpts from just yesterday, and began to read aloud, his voice steady and formal, outlining Michael's specific provisions. He read the clause stipulating the transfer of custody to Eleanor if Victoria attempted to remove her from the home or create a hostile environment. Victoria's polished mask cracked. Her eyes widened, flickered with desperation, then hardened into disbelief. "This is impossible," she interjected, her voice rising. "Michael never said anything like this. This is a lie. He wouldn't do this." David Lee ignored her outburst, pausing only to retrieve a small digital recorder from his briefcase. Mrs. Peterson Michael, anticipating such a reaction, took precautions. He documented his concerns about your behavior and intentions. He pressed play. Michael's voice, clear and distinct, filled the room. "I'm worried, David. Victoria's changed. She's too focused on a fresh start, not on the kids' grief, or even on my mom." Then, Victoria's voice, chillingly cold and matter-of-fact. "Eleanor's not my responsibility, Michael. Once you're gone, she'll have to figure something out. I'm thinking California for the kids and me. A clean break. A fresh start." And again, Victoria's own words, discussing her plans to send Eleanor away, her complete disregard for Eleanor's well-being, and her desire to cut ties and relocate the children. The recordings ended, leaving a deafening silence. Victoria stood frozen, her face a mask of horror and fury, her own words condemning her. She had been so careless, so confident in her deception. Then, her gaze, blazing with a terrible rage, locked onto Eleanor. You're trying to take my children. This is all you're doing, you old hag. I'll fight this. You have nothing. No money. No home. How could you possibly care for them? I'll prove you unfit. And Eleanor, her voice quiet but firm, finally spoke. They're Michael's children too, Victoria. And according to his will, they're now my responsibility. He ensured I would have the means to care for them properly. Victoria scoffed. A desperate, brittle laugh. Means? You're homeless. You have nothing. David Lee stepped forward, his voice a calm, measured counterpoint to Victoria's hysteria. Actually, Mrs. Peterson, that brings us to the second significant provision of Michael's will. Eleanor Vance is the sole beneficiary of a $7 million inheritance, specifically earmarked by Michael to ensure the children's welfare and her ability to provide them with a secure future. The words hung in the air, a final, crushing blow. Victoria stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with utter shock and disbelief. The carefully constructed world she had envisioned. The freedom, the wealth, the fresh start, crumbled around her. She had not only lost custody of her children, but she had also lost access to the vast fortune she had undoubtedly been counting on. The money was Eleanor's, not hers. No, Victoria cried, tears finally streaming down her face, not of grief for Michael, but of pure, unadulterated self-pity and fury. This isn't fair. I'm their mother. Eleanor stepped forward, her gaze unwavering, her voice devoid of triumph, only a quiet, resolute sadness. You had ample opportunity to be their mother, Victoria, to comfort them in their grief, to honor Michael's memory. Instead, you redecorated the house before the paint was dry, threw out his cherished belongings, and planned to discard me and relocate the children to California, as if they were inconvenient luggage. The social worker, Miss Jenkins, spoke up, her voice firm. We noted during our initial assessment that the children's personal belongings, including their toys and books, appear to have been removed from the communal areas of the home. Mrs. Peterson, this aligns with a pattern of detachment from their emotional needs. As the group prepared to leave, the silence heavy with the weight of Victoria's defeat, she suddenly lunged forward, grabbing Eleanor's arm, her grip desperate. Please, Eleanor, don't do this. The children need stability. They need their mother. Eleanor gently, but firmly, removed Victoria's hand from her arm. Her voice was soft, laced with a quiet resolve that cut deeper than any shout. You had your chance to provide stability, Victoria. You chose differently. She looked at her daughter-in-law, a hint of something unyielding in her gaze. Supervised visits will be allowed, on my terms, and only when I am certain it is in Lily and Noah's best interest. Dour. Ever was. The drive to the children's school was a blur of emotions for Eleanor. A strange mixture of sadness for the difficult conversation that lay ahead, and overwhelming anticipation at finally being reunited with Lily and Noah. She pictured their faces, their innocent eyes, and felt a surge of fierce protectiveness. She had rehearsed the words, gentle and reassuring, that she would say to them, knowing that Victoria's version of events would have already cast a shadow of confusion and hurt over their young minds. When they arrived, David Lee and the social worker waited outside the principal's office, while Eleanor was led to Lily's classroom. As Lily looked up from her desk and saw Eleanor, her face, which had been pale and withdrawn since Michael's passing, lit up with a fragile hope. Her first words, barely a whisper, pierced Eleanor's heart. Grandma, are you real? Or am I dreaming again? Eleanor's eyes welled up. She knelt down right there in the busy school hallway, ignoring the curious glances of teachers and students, and enveloped her granddaughter in a tight hug. Lily clung to her, small hands gripping Eleanor's clothes. I'm real, sweetheart, Eleanor murmured, stroking Lily's soft hair. I'm real. And I'm here to take you and Noah home. I sighed. Lily pulled back, her eyes still wide with a mix of wonder and lingering pain. Mommy said you left because you didn't want to live with us anymore, she whispered, her voice trembling. Just then, Noah appeared. guided by the social worker. His initial joy at seeing Eleanor quickly turning guarded as he heard Lily's words. "Yeah," he added, his brow furrowed. "Mom said you were mad at us." Eleanor's heart ached with a profound sadness. Victoria's cruelty knew no bounds. Eleanor sat down on the cold hallway floor, pulling both children into her embrace. "No, my loves. That's not true," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Grandma didn't leave because I was mad at you, or because I didn't want to live with you. I love you both more than anything in the world." She looked from Lily's tear-filled eyes to Noah's skeptical gaze. "I left because your mother asked me to leave, and at the time, I thought I had to do what she said. Rechene." Lily burst into fresh tears, burying her face in Eleanor's shoulder. "Grandmas aren't supposed to leave," she sobbed. Eleanor held them both tighter, pressing kisses to their heads. "And this grandma is never leaving you again," she promised, her voice thick with emotion. "Never, ever again." Miss Jenkins, the social worker, knelt beside them, her voice calm. "Lily and Noah, you're going to be living with your grandmother now. She's going to take wonderful care of you. It 7 pays." Noah's eyes widened, a spark of cautious hope replacing the suspicion. We don't have to live with Mom anymore?" he asked, the question loaded with unspoken meaning. Eleanor looked at him, knowing she needed to be honest, but gentle. "You'll still see your mom, sweetie, but you'll be living with Grandma, in our own special place, just for us." A small, hopeful smile bloomed on Lily's face. Can I have pictures of Daddy in my room?" she asked, her voice small. Eleanor's heart swelled. "Oh, my sweet girl," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes again. "You can have as many pictures of Daddy as you want. A whole wall of Daddy pictures, if that's what you want. We'll talk about him every day." Noah, ever practical, still seemed skeptical. "But Mom said you didn't have any money," he piped up, echoing Victoria's cruel lies. Eleanor smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "Your daddy, Michael, was a very smart and loving man, Noah. He made sure I'd have everything I need to take care of you. He left me a very important job, actually. The job of taking care of his most precious treasures, you and Lily." They arrived at the temporary furnished apartment David Lee had arranged, a modest but warm and inviting space. The children, despite the emotional upheaval, found comfort in its simplicity. It felt safe. A stark contrast to the sterile environment they had left behind. That evening, after a chaotic but joyful trip to the grocery store, they ordered pizza. Just like old times, Eleanor sat on the floor with them, telling them stories about Michael as a little boy, his mischievous grin, his love for building forts, his endless questions about how things worked. For the first time in weeks, Lily and Noah laughed, their genuine, uninhibited laughter filling the quiet apartment. As they ate, Eleanor noticed Lily automatically beginning to clear the table, carefully wiping crumbs, while Noah kept glancing at the clock on the wall, a habit he had developed from Victoria's strict schedule. Eleanor gently placed her hand on Lily's arm. "It's okay, sweetheart. You don't have to clean right now. We can just relax. It's okay not to make everything perfect all the time." She looked at Noah. "And you don't have to worry about the time either, sweetie. We'll just enjoy being together." The children looked at her, then at each other, a fragile sense of peace settling over them. A new understanding that this home, with Grandma, was different. It was a place of unconditional love and freedom. Eleanor gave David Lee regular updates over the next few weeks, detailing the children's progress. He listened intently, acknowledging the astute observations Michael had made about Victoria's parenting style, but also highlighted the incredible resilience of children. Indeed, over the next few weeks, Lily and Noah slowly, tentatively, began to come back to life. The guarded expressions that had become their default slowly softened. They started engaging in boisterous play, leaving toys scattered, a comforting mess that Eleanor welcomed. The quiet, almost robotic obedience they had displayed under Victoria began to give way to the natural curiosity and joyful chaos of childhood. They also began to ask questions about Michael, genuine questions that went beyond the sanitized, almost impersonal memories Victoria had permitted, questions about what he liked to eat, what his favorite color was, what games he played when he was little. Eleanor shared stories, pulling out old photo albums, even showing them shaky home videos of Michael as a clumsy toddler and a goofy teenager. She told them about his secret fear of spiders, his childhood terror of thunderstorms, and how he'd overcome them, teaching them about bravery in the face of fear. These conversations were incredibly healing for all three of them. The children began to reclaim their father as a real person, not just a distant, tragic memory. And Eleanor found solace in sharing him with them. One rainy Saturday afternoon, as Lily was drawing at the kitchen table, she looked up to find Eleanor quietly crying as she folded laundry, a familiar faded shirt of Michael's in her hands. "Grandma, are you sad about Daddy?" Lily asked, her voice soft and understanding. Eleanor nodded, wiping her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart. I am. I miss him very much." She reached out and pulled Lily into her lap. "And it's okay to be sad, my love. It's okay to cry. It doesn't mean we're not brave. It just means we loved him a lot." Lily leaned into her, and for a long moment, they simply cried together, sharing memories, openly grieving without worrying about affecting the adults around them. Eleanor realized that this was something the children hadn't been allowed to do with Victoria. To simply be sad. To mourn freely. In those quiet moments, Eleanor understood Michael's true gift. He hadn't just given her money and custody. He had given her purpose. He had given her the chance to give his children what they needed most: unconditional love, a safe space to grieve, and the freedom to simply be children. 6 months later, Eleanor stood in the sun-filled kitchen of their new, modest but cozy home. It wasn't a mansion, but it hummed with the joyful sounds of Lily and Noah's laughter, the clatter of breakfast dishes, and the cheerful chaos of life. The walls were adorned with family photos, some old, some newly taken, and yes, an entire wall in Lily's room was dedicated to pictures of Michael. A knock at the door. Eleanor opened it to find Victoria standing there, looking uncertain. Eleanor noted the changes in her daughter-in-law. The sharp edges seemed a little softer, her designer clothes replaced by more subdued attire. She had sold the showcase house, David Lee had informed Eleanor, unable to keep up the facade or the maintenance. "Eleanor," Victoria began, her voice hesitant. I came to apologize. For how I treated you. For what I said. Losing them. Losing Lily and Noah. It made me realize a lot of things." Her eyes were red-rimmed, carrying a sorrow that felt more genuine than any Eleanor had seen from her before. Eleanor listened, her expression unreadable. "The children need you to be real with them. Victoria," she said gently, "they need you to show them your emotions, to admit your mistakes, to be honest. That's what they really need." Victoria looked down at her hands. "I don't know how," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I was always taught to hide my struggles, to be strong, no matter what." She looked up, a raw vulnerability in her eyes. "You're a good grandmother, Eleanor. Better than I ever gave you credit for." Eleanor felt a pang of something akin to pity. It was a small step, but it was a step. She had allowed Victoria supervised visits, carefully monitored by Miss Jenkins, and had noticed the subtle shifts. For Lily's upcoming birthday, Eleanor had even agreed to an extra supervised visit at a local park. Victoria was trying, in her own flawed way. Later that week, Noah, ever perceptive, asked Eleanor, "Grandma, is Mom getting better?" She seemed sadder, but nicer. Eleanor hugged him tight. "She's trying, sweetie," she said. "And that's what matters." Eleanor often reflected on her incredible journey. From a heartbroken, invisible woman sleeping in her car, she had been transformed into a confident, purpose-driven guardian. She saw her reflection in the mirror now, not just a survivor, but a woman made stronger by adversity, softer by love, and deeply aware of her own worth. She would often reread Michael's letter, his words a constant reminder. "You are the heart of this family." He had trusted her, loved her, and ensured her place. Eleanor finally felt peace, belonging, and a quiet joy. The simple, ordinary family life, filled with love, laughter, and the beautiful chaos of Lily and Noah, was exactly what Michael had ensured for them all, and she, their spoiling grandmother, would never, ever leave them.